it's a real honor to be speaking to my fellow countrymen in South Africa about the opportunity to access new markets. So I want to share my screen here a little bit to give you a quick insight into what our business done, a little bit about our background. But as you might, well, hopefully hear, is that I still speaking with a South African accent, but I'm speaking to you from South Lake here in Texas. My family and I lived in the US for the last 9 years, and we're privileged enough to be able to do business with Southern Africa and to help out fellow entrepreneurs and business people access this market. So in order to give you a little bit of insight where we've come from, we've come at, as entrepreneurs, we've built our first beverage brand based on Southern African agriculture, specifically rooibos here in the US. And later on, we've added some more brands. We're also part of the Argosy, and then subsequently the Murgon group of companies out of Stellenbosch. So what we endeavor to do as ONTDEK is really to be a platform for agriculture and for food and beverage and other consumer goods to have an easy start and a departure point in launching into the US. So I think to give you a little bit deeper sense is that the pain that we're solving in what we're doing is that we give access between the two places. Because the suppliers are and the manufacturers and farmers are in one part of the world, but the market is in a different part of the world. So ONTDEK's platform aims to solve the multifaceted problem that is. To give you a quick sense, I mean, we're headquartered here in Dallas, Texas area. We do have a team in California as well. But the dots and the circles that you see there is really warehouse infrastructure in order to move the product on the North American continent. Now, in order to solve this problem statement, I would add that most of you will be aware that it's not a simple problem statement. It's multifaceted. So it's not just as simple as getting somebody to help out with sales in order to access this new market. It's not just a warehouse. It's not just somebody that can help you with the promotion support and the marketing and order management on this side. It's an holistic solution that's required in order to do that. So, but I think it's also important to elaborate that we're not an intermediary. We're a support business. So we help you build your platform and your direct access to this market. Because as you know, especially in a competitive landscape like North America, there aren't really place for intermediaries in the value chain. So we need to land the product in a competitive price place in the US. But more importantly, though, is we endeavor to create the value for the ultimate source giver, the farmer, the owners, and the manufacturers on the African side, in order to help them not to just be price takers. So what we've solved as ONTDEK or endeavored to solve is really to be a conduit and a place to land in North America. And obviously that's part of our entrepreneurial journey. So largely what I'm talking to you about is what we've done for ourselves and what we endeavor to do to help other people do that or be able to do the same. I think it's important to mention a couple of things that we see from the US side, which I've heard from some of the previous speakers emphasize as well, but I cannot emphasize these things enough. First and foremost is that we see Africa rising as a global supply source and a global food source specifically. We see tremendous growth opportunity and the world needs it. Now, there are some geopolitical and some major moves happening in the US specifically. And just for clarity, I mean, I do have a team in Hong Kong as well. So we understand the Hong Kong or the Asian market and the Chinese market to some extent. But what we see is that US buyers and consumers are moving away from purchasing in China at a very big rate. We've had some projects in our world either canceled or changed because of the ingredients and sourcing supply chain coming from China in some small ways. But so if we see these movements happening and the US are buying less from China than they previously did, that leaves a fantastic opportunity for another source to step into the gap. And I can't think of a more or better source than Africa, poised to really take part of that growth. And I mean, you guys would have seen it, and especially the numbers coming through from fresh produce exports into the US that have grown so much during 2020. I think it's also important to say that the reasons for these movements away from China, the sentiment that we pick up here in the US, it's not about political issues or tension that might be perceived on news. It's more of a food safety and labor practices concerns that might have infiltrated, I mean, the perceptions. So, but still, it is happening, and the need for African goods are real. It also is trending. For example, African botanicals seems to be trending upwards because of their natural remedy effects. So many projects that we touch has to do with that positive trend as well. So all the ecosystems like AGOA, the relative exchange rate benefits, the lower labor cost, impact capital, moving its attention to Africa, all speaks about a very interesting time to do this. So I think with that said, I would like to leave you with a few thoughts from an entrepreneur to entrepreneurs and to business leaders about how to approach this market coming into it. And I think these are just tips. So the first thing that I would mention here is that keep the value as far as you can. We work quite a bit with large institutional investors like Stepstone Capital, and one of their interesting statements the last couple of months is that they believe in agriculture as a top strategy for them. Now that's interesting because it's hard to extract investor returns, disproportionate investor returns from typical agriculture. Now they believe they get it from two places. The first place is from agri-tech, and the other place is from integrated supply chains, meaning the fewer intermediaries, the fewer guys between the actual farm and the consumer, the better. So when you build your supply chains into the US, remember, retain more value, try to keep your supply chain as lean as possible. And we can certainly help you with figuring out how to do that into the US. Now, the second tip I want to give you is that give this a fighting chance. So that means is that, remember, this is the most competitive landscape, globally speaking, or consumer goods landscape. So make sure that you are well planned, your price points are competitive, your quality is competitive, you communicate in a very professional way. So to make sure to bring the A game when you enter this market. Then the third thing that I would say is that we see that, well, the tip is about being different, having differentiated offerings, but also at the same time, tapping into staple requirements for the US consumer. And it really derives from what we see US buyers are looking for the most. The first one is that the first question that they're asking, is this thing different from what I have currently? The second thing is that, will I make more money by buying this product? And the third thing is that, is there enough general demand and pull through for this thing that people will come to me to buy this? And those things will lead you to make certain selections of your offering into the US. So the fourth thing that I will mention there to you is, remember, this is not a short game. Plan to remain in the game. You've got to be in it to win it. So make sure that your rollout strategy is done in a patient way, to start small and then grow where the success is. Don't go too fast, too quickly. Make sure that you build trust relationships. Remember, I mean, trust is not earned or given immediately. It happens a little bit over time. So make sure that your efforts into a market like this is patient and entrepreneurial. Don't go too fast, too quickly. And then the last thing that I want to mention as tips there for you guys is that remember to learn from others' mistakes, like our own. Um, Again, don't go too fast, too quickly. I mean, things can get very expensive in rolling out in the US. Start small, but be ready for scale approach is what we always recommend. Um, the second tip that I want to, the second thing that we see, mistakes that we've seen other people make is be concerned or be careful for fragmented support. Remember, in entering another market, you need multiple things taken care of. Make sure that those things talk to one another, like the sales support, as well as the warehousing, as well as any back office administration. But those things actually communicate with one another in order to make sure that, I mean, orders are not dropped or done in a way that doesn't satisfy the customers. So, but I hope these tips from one entrepreneur to the other empower you guys to make less mistakes than we do and be empowered in the way. So seeing that we've spent a little bit of time trying to get online, I'm going to skip part of it, but I'm happy to share the presentation with anybody to give you a detailed sense. But I mean, this was just an approach to show you how to prepare, a couple of tips regarding what structures and what partners to put in place with trading with the US. I mean, the corporate entities are important to consider as well. And then ultimately, the price of trading with North America is worth it. So I want to encourage you, don't be concerned about or get scared of it. Actually go at it, but be entrepreneurial and aggressive. So as a last thought, I'm going to skip through here just to give you a quick view of the capabilities that our organization has built. We certainly help with sales to actually connect to this market. One thing about this that I want to mention specifically around agriculture is that we've recently done a study on specifically plant proteins and protein alternatives. And I can tell you that the market is trending upwards very strongly. So to work with a platform like ours to create direct market access will help farmers in agriculture, and it doesn't have to be all big farmers, gain direct access and disintermediate a lot of that in order to not be just price takers in your trades, but actually get the highest price point for your commodities and for your offering in the US. So our team can certainly help out with on the sales side. We've got logistics backbone in order to help out there. We do also help with localizing part of your supply chain, helping to manufacture local here in the US. We have a pretty bulky marketing team that can help with the rollout and communication here. At the same time, we do back office processing, and like everybody wants to launch with e-commerce, and we assist with that certainly as well. So in order to, I mean, be efficient with time, I'll probably end it there, but I appreciate you guys listening, and it was an honor to just be able to share some of the insights that we've gained through this time with my fellow countrymen.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. My name is Saul, and after the lightning strikes, I will change my name to Paul. So I'm still on my way to Damascus. Sincerest apologies, colleagues. The previous session I was moderating took longer because we struggled a bit to connect. We had connectivity problems, and the problem with the afternoon sessions whilst working from home, after school, then you have to compete for the Wi-Fi with the kids because they want to play online gaming. But thank you, Paul, for taking the bull by the horns And I would say that colleagues are free to write questions on the site. We are now going to take Thulasizwe, and after Thulasizwe, I will then open the floor for discussion.
I am Thulasizwe Mkhabela from the Agricultural Research Council. My responsibility there is impact and partnership. Impact speaks to assessing the socio-economic impact of research and development in agriculture. As in short, what impact does the work of the RC have on society? And partnership is just like the name suggests. I'm looking after partnerships for the organization and making sure that we find like-minded partners. I'm just going to go straight into what I prepared to speak to today, and my approach is between some kind of a policy speech, but also some practical realities on the ground in terms of linking agribusinesses to new markets to facilitate growth in commercial farming and export-oriented agro-processing. I know that Paul gave us the lowdown in terms of what his business does and how one can actually access the US market, which is very, very useful for the session. Colleagues, you will recall that supply chains are changing rapidly, with transactions increasingly based on chains that involve coordinated links between farmers, traders, processors, retailers, and consumers. So the way business is done in the agribusiness space, or agro-food sector, as I prefer to call it, is changing at a very fast rate. Consumers are becoming more demanding, or in other words, more discerning in terms of quality and safety, and demographics and income trends are leading to increased demand for convenient foods, together with assurance of product safety. So as we think about linking agribusinesses to markets, it's important that one does not lose sight of the mega trends and the drivers of the trends in the industry as we see them today. And one of the most important things now is that whatever you do as an agribusiness has to be informed by what the consumer wants, the end user, because now consumers are more discerning and they have found their voice in terms of demanding and voting with their dollars or their rands in what services they prefer in the space. And the biggest issue is taste and preferences that are changing as people's dynamics change, income, migration from rural to urban areas, and all those sorts of demands that brings. But importantly is also the assurance of product safety, which also talks about the issue of traceability. The consumer now wants to know where the food comes from, how it was produced, and all that. So marketing systems are undergoing rapid transformation, like I said. The traditional marketing channels with ad hoc sales are being replaced by coordinated links between farmers, processors, retailers, and others. And this is as a result of increasing incomes, which then makes consumption patterns change, as there is a greater emphasis towards what you would consider high-value foods or even luxury foods. And there is a trend towards more protein-based diets, where there is more demand for meat and dairy products, and meat includes poultry and fish, and also fruits and vegetables. And as we endeavor to ensure that farmers are linked to, not necessarily just farmers, but agribusinesses, including farmers, are linked properly to lucrative markets, one has to understand that as an entrepreneur, you must start with the market in mind before you produce. Gone are the days where people will try and sell what they've produced, but now you produce what you know that the market is demanding. And that speaks to the quality, it speaks to the volumes, it speaks to the time of delivery, and all the other idiosyncratic demands that the market might have. So moving forward, the role of aggregators, I heard Paul mentioning that a bit, the going between us, even though as we endeavor to make the value chain shorter, they still have a role to play in agribusinesses, especially in the African setup and the rural, small scale, even land reform farmer projects in South Africa, where the market do not necessarily want to deal with a plethora of small-scale farmers that are supplying them with produce of differentiated qualities. They want uniformity in terms of quality. They want the volumes that they want. And this is the space that the aggregator will fill in. And experience has shown that any attempt to link farmers to markets or even agribusinesses down the value chain to market without assurance of the volumes normally fails, because the ad hoc sales, whenever you've produced, it doesn't work anymore. As we get sophisticated and supermarkets and the likes take over, they want convenience, things to be delivered when they want them, where they want them. And the important thing, another important factor that we need to take cognizance of, and that experience has taught us, is that mutual trust between all actors in the chain is essential. In most cases, you find that farmers feel like the middlemen or even the agribusinesses that are off-takers of their produce are ripping them off because they're not convinced that there is complete transparency. So we need to make sure that we ensure that there is mutual trust between the two parties. And linking agribusiness to markets entails development of a long-term business relationship rather than ad hoc support for sales. And we know that a very important approach to this is contract farming, which also includes strategic partnerships, where you find that agribusinesses, normally large agribusinesses that are well established in the market, that need primary products to add value to, but do not necessarily want to farm or do not have access to the land, partner with the farmers in terms of offtake, but they also then give capacity building to make sure that these producers, primary producers, produce the produce that they require at the quality that they demand. And this is an important thing where trust also plays an important role. And a caveat here is that you need to be aware of the dangers of moral hazard and adverse selection. In simple terms, what I mean is that where one party seems to put in the effort when the other doesn't, just because I've got a secured market as a farmer, I may not necessarily be motivated to actually put in the effort to deliver the quality and then shift that responsibility to the agribusiness, who's an off-taker, because he's also providing some input into the production system. So the types of linkages that one can think of when you think about linking agribusinesses to new markets is where the farmer is linked to the domestic trader. The second one is when the farmer is linked to the retailer. And the third one is linkages through a leading farmer and linkages through a cooperative. These two I would then put in parentheses and say this is where the role of the aggregator is even more relevant. And then the fifth one would be farmer to agro-processor. And then the sixth would be farmer to exporter. And then the contract farming that I spoke of. But the important thing that we need to bear in mind as we deal with this topic is that we need to understand that the farmers, both all the players in the value chain are in it for a business. And it's all about making profit margins and making sure that it's lucrative and sustainable for everybody who is in the value chain. So linking farmers to new markets, and this is even more relevant for South Africa, because South Africa has a long history of successful exporting of agricultural products. One would think of our horticultural products that find their way to all markets in the world, including your sophisticated EU, Asia, and even the US markets. And this is where we should learn lessons to say, how do we then bring in the new players in the agribusiness space to actually make sure that they benefit from the experience that has been gained over the years by South African agribusinesses that are exporting. But what I want to end with is just highlighting the importance of the recently signed and ratified Africa Free Trade Agreement that African countries have signed. This presents a huge potential and opportunity for South African agribusinesses to actually exploit this spot and go into the African market and make sure that we are marketing our produce. Then that to me is one of the most attractive new markets that has come to the party, that our agribusinesses in South Africa and in Africa general need to capitalize on. Because if as African agribusinesses and entrepreneurs we cannot capitalize, guess what will happen? The large multinational agribusinesses will fill the space, even in the Africa Free Trade Agreement, and they will only use African countries as bases so that the products that they'll be selling will be products of origin from Africa. So the African players need to make sure that they guard against being overpowered by these large well-established multinational agribusinesses. And also at a policy level, governments need to make sure that the limited number of dominant players do not use their market position dominance to then come up with uncompetitive practices that will squeeze out the local agribusinesses in Africa that want to capitalize on this Africa free trade market that has been created, which will be incidentally the largest in the world in terms of the number of people and sheer volumes of the market that it presents. And the second thing that agribusinesses in the African space, as they endeavor to link themselves to markets that they need to guard against, is this trend that we are observing of multinationals buying every local medium scale, even smaller ones, agribusinesses that seem to be successful just to expand their market and sort of kill the competition. And that does not actually assist in developing the African economies, which I think this is what we're all about as Market Access Africa, looking at how the African producers, agribusinesses and entrepreneurs can really benefit from the new markets that are emerging. And there is a lot of goodwill for African agribusinesses, as Paul has just enlightened us, that with the large developed markets trying to move away from China, somebody has to fill that void and has to fill that gap that will be created, and Africa should capitalize on that and not even feel apologetic about filling that space. I think that's just all I prepared in terms of the presentation so that we can have a discussion going on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you, Saul.
Thank you very much, Thulasizwe. Whilst we are exploring new markets, we also need to entrench our position in the current market. And my take is that there's some relative silence when it comes to the role of marketing in building agricultural brands. And if I declare my interest, I'm a marketer. That's why I will talk to this. And the most worrying thing for me is that we have this annual Brand Africa survey, which is conducted by Tebe Kalafeng through his Global Brand Leadership Group. And the survey is validated by the African Leadership University. And when they first launched the survey in 2010, they found that 34% of the top 100 most admired brands in Africa were of African origin. And that number has been dwindling down up until in 2019, it came down to 13%, which means that Africans are uptaking foreign brands. And my discomfort with that is that even if we are talking about the integration of Africa into one free trade area, it means made in Africa service and product brands will continue to suffer as foreign brands will continue dominating. And I would say that every entrepreneur in Africa needs to invest a reasonable amount from their budgets allocated to marketing so that we can build the kind of brands that can compete effectively with all the foreign brands that are imported into the continent. I saw a few questions on the chat box. I think it will be up to Paul and Tula to decide who responds to which question. I will just read them. One says from Paresh Kotecha, he says, I'm sorry I'm joining late. What is the benefit for the aggregator? Currently, the less the transparency, the more margin they can keep. Let me read his comment before you respond to the question. Dominant stakeholders thrive on opaque markets and the lack of transparency. This is how margins are secured for international traders who have off-take, competitive financing, and so on. I think when you respond to that immediately, you should wrap up because we are chasing after time, unfortunately. And then I will just come in to thank you on behalf of the African Agri Council. Even if you don't respond to the question, you can give us your parting shots.
Okay, let me combine it with my attempt to respond to the point. I agree completely with Paresh in what he is saying. Hence, maybe one thing I missed out in my presentation is that the issue of information asymmetry is a big problem, where the information lies with the off-taker in this case, or the aggregator who has all the knowledge. So as a policy intervention or as a public good, the public sector should provide information, marketing information, and the requirements that the international markets require, so that the agribusinesses are empowered to bargain on an equal footing, having the same information as the one who is an off-taker. Because often people end up selling at whatever price that they are being told that that's the going rate, because you don't have any other information that tells you otherwise. So a very important point in being linked to markets is understanding the markets, investing in information and intelligence meaning market intelligence, so that you know exactly what is happening. Then you would know when somebody is pulling wool over your eyes. And I think I like that comment very much. It's often missed, sometimes conveniently so, in policy making, because it's a difficult one to actually unravel. Because once you start squeezing the off-takers or the aggregators that you say you need, you don't have an option of how this produce will end up to the market. So you end up saying, better the devil I know than anything else. And in terms of closing, I want to emphasize the importance of gatherings like this, where we have dialogues about market access. Because the farmers, I will reduce agribusinesses to farmers just for the closing purposes, to say that the farmers know how to farm, but it does not necessarily mean that they are good business people. And then we need to actually inculcate that in the African agribusinesses, that if you say you are a business, the business acumen must be at par, just like any other business. It is only in agriculture when you meet somebody and ask them, what are you? They say, I'm a farmer. In other sectors, people tell you I'm a businessman before they tell you the sector that they're involved in. You meet somebody who sells products or is a salesman who says, I'm a businessman, before he tells you that I sell vacuum cleaners. So the businessman should come first, that acumen of saying we are in it for business. And I think I will leave that as a parting shot and saying that we should never underestimate the role of agricultural research and development and technology in empowering the sector, so that it remains and it grows and becomes competitive. Because South African farming is where it is today because of the investment of the past in terms of agricultural research and innovation. Thank you very much, Saul. Thank you, Paul, if I don't see you again.
Thulasizwe, well said. And if I can add to that, I mean, I think intermediaries have not done themselves justice. There's a big trend towards disintermediation. So the typical importer-distributor model is increasingly under pressure and moving away, because they've done just the simple thing. They want to buy as low as possible from the farmer and sell as high as possible on the other side. Now, theoretically, there's nothing bad in it, but that puts immense pressure on the farmer. So given that technology and communication is enabling us to do this thing cross borders and communicate well and flow data well, there is very little reason why agri-processors or farmers could not have direct market access. So sure, certain market expertise is necessary still, but I mean, from an ONTDEK point of view, we had to do real soul searching to decide what are we, and we came up with the decision that we are definitely not going to be an intermediary. So because of those reasons, so our aim is to make sure that we build the farmers or the agro-processors supply chain, not ours. And we believe that ultimately that's where value sits, and that's where impact sits. That's where more jobs can be created and the value flows through to the right places. So, and with that, I mean, everybody, thank you for the honor of having to connect with you guys. We wish you all the blessings and support on this journey of accessing new markets.
Oh, thank you very much to my two panelists. I'm also thanking you, As Brandhill Africa, I'm a strategic partner to African Agri Council. We are a competitive identity and public diplomacy agency based in Johannesburg. On the 15th of July, we were fortunate that the World Brand Congress bestowed upon us the Best Brand Award because they appreciated the effort we're doing across the continent. On behalf of African Agri Council, let me thank you for participating in this panel. Let me also thank the delegates who joined us.